First contact and fatal assumptions. Captain Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the cool metal wall of the bridge and watched the stars shift outside the viewport. The exploration vessel Wanderer had been traveling for 6 months, mapping new systems on the edge of known space. Her crew of 12 was small but experienced, each person chosen for their expertise and ability to handle the unexpected. Sarah had commanded ships for 15 years, but she had never seen anything like what appeared on their sensors that morning. Dr. Marcus Webb looked up from his xenobiology station, his weathered face creased with concern. He was a tall man with gray hair who had spent most of his career studying the possibility of alien life. Now that possibility was becoming reality in the most unsettling way. The sensor data showed energy signatures unlike anything in human databases, moving in formations that suggested intelligence and purpose. These weren't natural phenomena or space debris. These were ships, and they were heading directly toward the Wanderer. Engineer Rosa Martinez worked quietly at her station, her steady hands making adjustments to the ship's systems. She was younger than the others, maybe 35, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. What her crewmates didn't know was that Rosa had served 10 years in the Colonial Defense Corps before becoming a civilian engineer. Her training in military tactics and combat systems was something she kept to herself, preferring to let others see her as simply someone who fixed machines and kept the ship running. The proximity alarms began to sound across the bridge. Sarah moved to the captain's chair and activated the intercom to address her crew. Her voice remained calm and professional despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She had learned long ago that panic was contagious, and a captain's job was to project confidence even when facing the unknown. The safety of her crew depended on everyone staying focused and thinking clearly. Outside the viewport, space itself seemed to ripple and bend. Massive shapes emerged from what appeared to be folded space, their hulls gleaming with an otherworldly light. The alien vessels were enormous, each one easily 10 times the size of the Wanderer. Their design was organic and flowing, like they had been grown rather than built. Weapon ports along their hulls glowed with a menacing energy that made the humans' defensive systems seem pathetically inadequate. Commander Tekvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominant Fang, and studied the small human vessel through his tactical display. He was a towering figure even by Korthani standards, his reptilian features marked by centuries of military service. Scales the color of burnished bronze covered his powerful frame, and his yellow eyes held the cold intelligence of a born predator. The Korthani had conquered 17 different species across their empire, and each victory had followed the same pattern: first contact, demonstration of superior force, then inevitable surrender. The human ship was laughably primitive by Korthani standards. Its hull was simple metal construction with none of the bioorganic enhancements that marked truly advanced civilizations. Its weapons were basic energy projectors that might damage an asteroid, but would barely scratch Korthani armor plating. Most telling of all, it appeared to be alone, suggesting that these humans had not yet learned the wisdom of traveling in protected fleets when exploring dangerous space. Admiral Zixmoth materialized on the bridge through the ship's internal transport system. She was smaller than Tekvar, but radiated an authority that made even the commander straighten his posture. Her scales were darker, almost black, and her movements carried the fluid grace of someone who had survived countless battles. As the supreme leader of this expedition, she had the final authority over how to handle these new aliens. The decision would determine whether humanity faced destruction or merely absorption into the Empire. Dr. Veltar emerged from his laboratory deep within the ship, carrying a data pad filled with preliminary analysis of the human vessel. He was different from the typical Korthani warrior, smaller and more thoughtful, with lighter scales that marked him as coming from the scientist caste. His role was to study new species and determine their potential value to the Empire. Some aliens were useful as laborers, others as technicians, and a few rare species proved valuable as soldiers. The key was understanding their capabilities and limitations before making contact. Sarah watched the alien ships arrange themselves in what was clearly a military formation. The largest vessel positioned itself directly ahead of the Wanderer, while smaller ships moved to flank them from multiple directions. It was a classic containment pattern that blocked any possibility of escape. These aliens were not explorers making peaceful first contact. They were conquerors who had done this before, and they expected the encounter to follow familiar patterns. The communication system crackled to life with sounds unlike anything the humans had ever heard. The alien language was a complex mixture of clicks, hisses, and harmonic tones that seemed impossible for human vocal cords to produce. After several moments, the sounds shifted and resolved into words that the humans could understand. The universal translator technology was impressive, suggesting that these aliens had experience communicating with many different species. Commander Thekvar's voice filled the bridge of the Wanderer, carrying tones of authority and barely controlled threat. He identified himself and his fleet, making it clear that the humans had entered territory claimed by the Korthani Empire. The words were formally polite, but the underlying message was unmistakable. The humans were trespassers in space that belonged to a superior civilization, and their continued existence depended entirely on Korthani mercy and goodwill. Sarah activated the communication system and responded with careful diplomatic language. She explained that the Wanderer was an exploration vessel from Earth, engaged in peaceful scientific research. They had not intended to violate anyone's territory and would be happy to withdraw immediately if they had caused offense. Her words were chosen to project both respect and innocence while avoiding any admission of weakness or inferiority. Dr. Webb listened carefully to the exchange while making notes about Korthani psychology and culture. Their language patterns suggested a highly hierarchical society with strong military traditions. The casual way they spoke of territorial claims spanning multiple star systems indicated an empire of vast scope and ambition. Most importantly, their assumption that humans would automatically submit to their authority revealed a species accustomed to easy victories over technologically inferior opponents. Rosa used the opportunity to scan the alien ships with every sensor the Wanderer possessed. She kept her activities subtle, disguising active scans as passive observations while building a detailed picture of Korthani technology. Their ships used fusion reactors that were efficient but not revolutionary. Their weapons were powerful, plasma cannons that could devastate unshielded targets, but required significant charging time between shots. Most interestingly, their defensive systems seemed designed to counter energy weapons while showing potential vulnerabilities to kinetic projectiles. Admiral Zixmoth decided to make a demonstration of Korthani power. She ordered one of the escort vessels to target a nearby asteroid and reduce it to component particles. The alien ship's main weapon charged with visible energy that built to a brilliant crescendo before unleashing destruction across space. The asteroid, roughly the size of a city block, simply ceased to exist in a flash of converted matter and energy. The message was clear and unmistakable. The humans watched the display with appropriate expressions of awe and concern. Sarah allowed her voice to carry a slight tremor when she acknowledged the impressive demonstration of Korthani capabilities. Dr. Webb made notes with hands that shook just enough to be visible. Rosa's face showed the pale tension of someone who understood exactly how outgunned they were. Their reactions satisfied Korthani expectations of how primitive species should respond to superior force. Dr. Veltar studied the human responses and found them entirely predictable. Fear, awe, and growing acceptance of their helpless position followed patterns he had observed in 16 previous first-contact situations. These humans appeared to be at roughly the same technological level as the Uthari had been when the Korthani first encountered them 3 centuries ago. Like the Uthari, they would probably resist initially, but eventually accept the benefits of joining a galactic civilization under Korthani guidance. Commander Thekvar delivered the terms that had worked successfully with so many other species. The humans would be permitted to return to their homeworld and deliver a message to their leadership. Earth would have 48 standard hours to contact the Korthani fleet and arrange terms for peaceful surrender. Their military forces would be dissolved, their weapons technology turned over to Korthani control, and their population relocated to worlds where they could contribute productively to the Empire. Sarah accepted the terms with the resignation of someone who had no other choice. The Wanderer would return immediately to Earth and deliver the Korthani message to human leadership. She requested safe passage through Korthani space and permission to depart without interference. Her tone carried the defeat and desperation that conquerors expected to hear from representatives of doomed civilizations. The performance was convincing because it contained elements of genuine emotion mixed with careful calculation. The alien ships withdrew to a respectful distance and allowed the Wanderer to begin its journey back to human space. As the Corthani fleet disappeared behind them, Sarah's crew maintained their roles until they were certain they were beyond alien sensor range. Only then did the atmosphere on the bridge begin to change as trained professionals dropped their masks and began the real work of preparation and analysis. Rosa pulled up detailed schematics of the Corthani vessels on her private workstation. Her military training allowed her to identify weaknesses and tactical opportunities that civilian engineers might miss. The aliens were powerful and technologically advanced, but they had revealed their capabilities while learning very little about human potential. That asymmetry of information might prove to be the key to survival in what was coming next. Dr. Webb compiled his observations about Corthani psychology and social structure. Their arrogance was both a strength and a potential weakness. It gave them confidence and unity of purpose, but it also made them vulnerable to miscalculation and surprise. They expected other species to follow familiar patterns of resistance and eventual submission. Humans who refused to follow those patterns might gain significant advantages through the element of surprise. Sarah activated the ship's fastest communication systems and began transmitting coded messages ahead of their arrival. The signals would reach Earth hours before the Wanderer, giving human leadership time to prepare for what promised to be the most important crisis in their species' history. The messages contained detailed intelligence about Corthani capabilities, tactical assessments, and recommendations for response strategies that might save humanity from conquest or destruction. The journey back to Earth took 18 hours at maximum speed. During that time, the crew of the Wanderer worked continuously to analyze everything they had learned and prepare for what was coming. None of them slept well, but it wasn't fear that kept them awake. It was anticipation and careful planning for humanity's response to the Corthani ultimatum. The aliens had made their first move in what they assumed would be a brief and decisive campaign. Soon, they would discover how badly they had miscalculated the species they intended to conquer. The moment of truth. The Corthani fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system exactly 48 hours after their ultimatum expired. Admiral Zixmoth stood on the bridge of her flagship, expecting to find humanity's surrender message waiting for them. Instead, her communication officers reported complete silence from the human homeworld. No desperate pleas for mercy, no offers of negotiation, no sign that Earth's government even acknowledged their presence. The silence was unusual, but not unprecedented. Some species chose defiance before accepting inevitable defeat. Commander Thekvar studied the tactical display showing the inner solar system. Earth appeared exactly as their long-range sensors had suggested during their research after first contact. The third planet showed signs of a primitive industrial civilization with basic orbital infrastructure. A few space stations orbited the world like tiny jewels, clearly designed for scientific research rather than military defense. Several smaller installations dotted the asteroid belt, probably mining operations to support their limited space-based economy. Dr. Veltar analyzed the data flowing in from their reconnaissance probes. Human technology seemed even more backward than their initial assessment had suggested. The orbital stations used simple rotating sections to create artificial gravity, instead of the gravitational field generators that any advanced species would employ. Their spacecraft moved with chemical rockets and basic fusion drives that would have been considered antiques in Corthani space. Most telling of all, there were no defensive weapon platforms or military vessels visible anywhere in the system. The human response came not through official diplomatic channels, but from a single small vessel that emerged from Earth's atmosphere. The ship was clearly civilian, unmarked, and broadcasting standard peaceful approach signals. It requested permission to approach the Corthani fleet under a flag of truce to deliver Earth's official response to their ultimatum. The vessel was so small and obviously harmless that Admiral Zixmoth granted permission without hesitation. Captain Sarah Chen piloted the diplomatic shuttle toward the alien fleet with the same steady competence she had shown during first contact. Dr. Webb sat beside her, carrying the official documentation of Earth's response in multiple formats to ensure clear communication. Both humans appeared appropriately nervous about approaching the massive alien warships, their body language suggesting people who understood they were completely at the mercy of superior forces. The shuttle docked with the dominant Fang through a temporary airlock that Corthani engineers had hastily configured for human physiology. Sarah and Marcus were escorted through corridors that seemed designed to intimidate visitors with their vast scale and alien architecture. Bioluminescent panels cast strange shadows while the organic curves of the ship's interior created an unsettling sense of being inside some enormous living creature rather than a manufactured vessel. Admiral Zixmoth received the human delegation. In her command chamber, a vast space dominated by holographic displays showing the positions of every ship in her fleet. The room was designed to demonstrate the overwhelming military power at her disposal, while making visitors feel small and vulnerable. She had used this setting successfully to intimidate representatives from dozens of species who had eventually accepted Corthani rule as preferable to annihilation. Dr. Webb presented Earth's response with the formal courtesy of a career diplomat facing impossible circumstances. He explained that humanity's government had carefully considered the Corthani offer and recognized the futility of resistance against such an obviously superior civilization. Earth was prepared to accept incorporation into the Corthani Empire under terms that would minimize suffering for both species and allow for peaceful transition of authority. The surrender document was everything Admiral Zixmoth had expected. Human military forces would be disbanded and their weapons turned over to Corthani control. Earth's population would accept relocation to designated worlds where they could contribute to the Empire's economy. Human technology and scientific knowledge would be shared freely with their new Corthani rulers. In exchange, humanity would receive the protection and guidance of a truly galactic civilization. Sarah requested permission to transmit a final message to Earth, confirming that the surrender terms had been accepted. The transmission would give human leadership time to prepare their population for the changes that were coming and help minimize chaos during the transition period. Admiral Zixmoth granted the request as a gesture of magnanimity toward a species that had shown wisdom in accepting inevitable defeat. The message that Sarah transmitted to Earth was brief and seemed appropriately resigned. She confirmed that the Corthani terms had been accepted and that the transition of authority would begin immediately. Her words carried the weight of someone delivering news that would change her species forever. The transmission ended with what appeared to be personal messages to family members, adding an authentic note of human emotion to the moment of surrender. Commander Thekvar ordered his fleet to begin the occupation of Earth's solar system. The plan was simple and had worked successfully in 17 previous conquests. Smaller vessels would secure the asteroid mining operations and orbital installations while the main fleet moved toward Earth itself. Any signs of resistance would be met with overwhelming force, but intelligence suggested that humans lacked both the weapons and the will to oppose Corthani authority. The first surprise came when the Corthani ships approached the asteroid belt. What their long-range sensors had identified as simple mining operations suddenly revealed their true nature. Massive industrial complexes had been hidden within hollowed-out asteroids, their energy signatures masked by sophisticated stealth technology. As the alien ships drew closer, these installations powered up weapon systems that had been completely invisible just moments before. Rosa Martinez watched the tactical display from her position in the command center buried deep beneath Earth's surface. The facility was one of hundreds that had been constructed over the past century, hidden from orbital observation and connected by communication networks that the Corthani had never detected. Her role as a civilian engineer had been genuine, but it was also cover for her real position as a strategic operations coordinator for humanity's hidden defense network. The asteroid installations opened fire with weapons that violated everything the Corthani thought they knew about human technology. Instead of primitive energy beams, they launched kinetic projectiles accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. The attacks bypassed Corthani energy shields entirely, striking their ships with devastating physical force that caused catastrophic damage to vessels that had seemed invulnerable just moments before. Dr. Veltar stared at his sensor readings in growing disbelief. The kinetic weapons were not just effective, They were specifically designed to exploit weaknesses in Corthani defensive systems. The projectiles used exotic materials that maximized penetration, while their targeting systems predicted Corthani evasive maneuvers with impossible accuracy. This was not primitive technology adapted for desperate defense. This was advanced military engineering created by people who understood exactly what they were fighting. Admiral Zixmoth realized that she had walked her fleet into a carefully prepared trap. The humans had not surrendered because they were weak and defenseless. They had surrendered because they wanted the Corthani fleet to move into positions where hidden weapons could engage them most effectively. Every piece of intelligence about human capabilities had been carefully crafted, deception designed to lure alien forces into vulnerable positions. The space around Earth suddenly filled with ships that emerged from hiding places throughout the solar system. What had appeared to be civilian space stations revealed advanced military capabilities. Mining vessels in the asteroid belt transformed into heavily armed warships. Even Earth's moon proved to be riddled with weapon emplacements that had been invisible until they opened fire. The humans had not been caught unprepared by first contact. They had been preparing for this moment for generations. Commander Thekvar watched his tactical display in growing horror as Corthani ships throughout the system came under coordinated attack. The humans fought with a level of strategic coordination that should have been impossible for a species making their first contact with galactic civilization. Every human vessel seemed to know exactly where every other human vessel was positioned. Their attacks were timed to maximize damage, while minimizing their own exposure to return fire. Sarah Chen's voice came through the communication system with none of the deferent tone she had used during the surrender ceremony. Now she spoke with the authority of someone representing a species that had been planning for this confrontation for longer than the Corthani had realized. She explained that humanity had been aware of alien civilizations for over 2 centuries, ever since their deep space monitoring systems had detected evidence of interstellar empires. Dr. Webb appeared on screen beside Sarah, but now his role as a xenobiologist took on new meaning. He had not been studying the possibility of alien life. He had been studying specific alien species that humanity had been tracking across the galaxy. The Corthani Empire was just one of several civilizations that human intelligence had identified as potential threats. Everything about their first contact had been carefully orchestrated to gather information, while revealing as little as possible about human capabilities. The truth was more devastating than any weapon. Humanity had not been caught by surprise by alien contact. They had been preparing for it since before the Corthani Empire had conquered its first alien species. Human expansion into space had been driven not by scientific curiosity, but by strategic necessity. Every colony, every mining operation, every research station had been positioned to serve dual purposes as both civilian infrastructure and military assets. Rosa Martinez revealed her true identity as Director of Strategic Operations for the Solar Defense Network. The engineering skills she had demonstrated aboard the Wanderer were real, but they represented only a fraction of her actual expertise. She had spent 20 years developing the weapon systems that were now devastating the Corthani fleet. Every aspect of their technology had been designed specifically to counter the tactics and capabilities of known alien threats. Admiral Zixmoth found herself in a position she had never experienced before. Her fleet was not just outgunned, it was outmaneuvered by opponents who understood Corthani capabilities better than she understood human ones. The aliens she had intended to conquer had spent generations studying her species while revealing nothing significant about themselves. Every assumption her people had made about human technology and intentions had been carefully planted. Deception. Dr. Veltar made a discovery that chilled him more than the military defeat taking place around them. Analysis of human communication protocols revealed that their language contained embedded codes suggesting contact with multiple alien species. The humans had not just been aware of the Corthani Empire, they had been communicating with other galactic civilizations for decades, possibly centuries. This was not first contact. This was humanity revealing itself to an empire that had seriously underestimated its newest opponents. The battle ended as suddenly as it had begun. Human ships throughout the solar system ceased firing and took up defensive positions around Damaged Korthani vessels. Sarah Chen's voice filled the communication channels with an offer that no Korthani commander had ever heard from a supposedly conquered species. Humanity would provide medical assistance to injured Korthani personnel and safe passage out of human space for all surviving vessels. In exchange, they requested formal diplomatic contact with the Korthani government to discuss peaceful coexistence between their civilizations. Commander Thekvar realized that the humans were offering exactly what he had tried to force them to. Accept a peaceful transition that would minimize suffering for both species. The difference was that humanity was negotiating from a position of strength rather than accepting terms from conquerors. They had demonstrated the ability to destroy his fleet, but were choosing diplomacy instead of annihilation. It was a level of strategic sophistication that demanded respect even from career military officers. The Korthani withdrawal from human space took place under conditions that would have been unthinkable 48 hours earlier. Human vessels escorted damaged alien ships to the edge of the solar system while providing technical assistance and medical support. Dr. Webb worked alongside Korthani medical personnel to treat injured crew members, his xenobiology expertise proving invaluable in understanding alien physiology and psychology. Admiral Zixmoth accepted Sarah Chen's offer of a direct communication link to Earth's government. The conversation that followed would reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy. Humanity was not seeking to build an empire or conquer other species. They were offering an alternative to the cycle of conquest that had defined galactic politics for millennia. Species that chose cooperation over domination could find in humanity an ally rather than another overlord. Dr. Veltar's final report to the Korthani High Command contained a warning that would echo through every alien civilization in known space. Humanity had not been defeated because they were too powerful to conquer through conventional means. They had demonstrated something far more dangerous, the ability to appear weak while preparing for victory, the wisdom to choose diplomacy over destruction, and the strategic patience to plan for conflicts that might not occur for generations. Other species that encountered humans should prepare for opponents who would challenge every assumption about how galactic civilizations were supposed to interact with each other.